board members for upcoming Defend the North event happening April 3rd in Vancouver. I'm joined here today with my co-host and the brains behind Operation Defend the North scenarios, Ali Bass, and a few of our advisory board members. And later in the show, we will be giving away free online tickets and giving a 50% discount for the first 10 registrations today. So stay tuned. But before we get into it, Ali, did you want to do a quick rundown of Operation Defend the North for people that don't know what it is?
Well, the first thing is, Alex, you said that I'm the brains behind Operation Defend the North. So you're saying I do have a brain somewhere inside of me, and that goes a long way, Alex. You can now remain friends with me. So firstly, thank you, everybody, for joining. And before we begin, I want to give a shout out to Alex for everything that he's done to put ODTN Vancouver together. I also want to acknowledge that we're coming to you online, and the online space is also Indigenous space, as our cables, our fiber optic lines run across these lands, seas, and skies. In 1 minute, let me explain to you what Operation Defend the North is all about. It's one thing to train for consumption, meaning it's one thing to tell people, well, in the event of a ransomware, this is what we will do. It's quite the other to train for engagement. Instead of telling people that this is what we're going to do when we get hit with this type of an attack, put them in that situation. But there's a little bit of a clincher to this. Don't just put them in a role that they are typically playing in the workplace. Put them in different roles. Take a CISO, put them in a communications role. Take a communications person, put them in a CISO role. And then throw in a couple of our vendor communities and partners to the mix to see how they all work together. At Operation Defend the North, what you get to do is walk a couple of very painful miles in the shoes of a colleague, dealing with a cyber incident in real time. And you'll learn very quickly that it is a team sport. You will probably want to go after each other, but at the end of the day, you follow a certain process to get to some sort of a mode of recovery. If you can't get to that mode of recovery, well, you close down shop, and that's pretty much what happens in the real world. Operation Defend the North is a simulation of what happens in real time during a cyber event. Thank you, Alex, and back to you.
Thanks, Ellie. And there's a lot to unpack there, and I hope we're going to get through some of that on today's video. But first, I'd like to welcome our advisory board members that are here today and give them the chance to introduce themselves. So in 30 seconds or so, who are you, where you're from, and what keeps you excited about cybersecurity? And I'm just going to go based off of who's on my screen. Newman, you're up first.
Oh, hi. So my name is Newman. I'm the manager of cybersecurity at Odlum Brown. We are an investment firm. And as you know, being in the finance sector, we are one of the largest targets of any threat actor. What keeps me going? Let's just say that I learn a ton just from doing investigations, understanding how the threat actors, target our organizations, the tools they use, the infrastructure they use. All of those are things that you learn just by being in the firing line, against these threat actors. So they're the ones that keep me, motivated. They're the ones that I want to go after, and they're the ones that I want to ultimately stop before they do any harm.
Awesome. Prul, you're up next.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Very good morning or good afternoon from wherever you're joining us from. I am a senior advisor at Tech Resources Limited, and I have had fortune to work with Fortune 100 and 500 companies in the past through my experience and work stint with Big Four companies. What keeps me excited is I'm always on my toes to think about what the adversary might be thinking and how we can get ahead of them. So that's for me. Hey, Alex, back to you.
Thank you. Hardeep, you're up next.
Thanks a lot, Alex. Hardeep Malhotra. So I'm the Vice President of Information Systems Technology at Concert Properties. We're a property management construction company. What motivates me and keeps me going is just the constant evolution of cyber and the constant evolution of cyber attacks, right? We're definitely seeing more fast-paced the pace of attacks are increasing, and we're also seeing like even AI actually now being used by a lot of the cyber criminals. So it's that constant evolution of cyber attacks, and it's just not it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when a cyber attack occurs. So that's kind of every day you walk into work and it's something new and something different. So that's really what keeps me excited. Or back to you, Alex.
Thank you. And I'm hearing a commonality and an obsession for learning new things and playing the inevitable whack-a-mole game. Over to you, Melina.
Good morning. My name is Melina Singh. I'm the director of the Incident Response and Resilience team at Mirai Security. I've had about 15 years of a unique career that has been chasing cyber criminals throughout the world. I've done a large and long stint at the RCMP in law enforcement. I've done operations, so I've helped organizations basically at the hands on keyboard level, and then I've done incident response, and throughout the thread has always been helping victims, helping people make sure that they strengthen against the inevitable, as Hardeep said, and making sure that when something does happen, they're supported, and that it's not as it's a big event, but preparation makes the difference in all of these cases, and making sure that everybody has that preparation and feels that empowerment when something does happen.
Awesome. And last but certainly not least, Michael.
Hi, I'm Michael. I Security Operations Center lead for Mark Anthony Group. You know us for White Claw. And so I've been in security now for 5 years, but before that, it was 15 years in the IT space, working everything from EBC organizations to federal crown corporations and software companies. What keeps me going, the 2,500 people that work for Mark Anthony, these are my people. And I want to make sure that when they come to work every day, they can do their best safely, and that they can do their best to bring our products to market around the world without being interfered with, and without fear that tomorrow they might not have a company to come to work to. So that's important to me.
Awesome. So I'm pretty excited to be helping CyberX bring Operation Defend the North out west to Vancouver this spring. And this is because I believe tabletops are one of the most underrated things an organization can do to improve their business's resiliency. So, opening up to the virtual campfire we have, what are your thoughts on the importance of tabletops? And feel free to jump in.
I don't mind taking a first stab at this. I think one of the most important elements of tabletops is who runs your tabletops. I understand that myself in my work in my organization, yes, I can always go to a third party and bring them in. But the key for me is actually to have the ability within your team to have people that can run this for you. And I'll tell you why. For me with tabletops, it's about role playing, and more importantly than role playing, it's about understanding the different caveats that you can be hit with. I don't think we truly appreciate that when you get that moment when, sure, an incident is unfolding, but you get that occasion when there's a media report about this, and that media report is causing you a lot of damage. If you within your team can think those extra miles, and you can think about what are those other areas that can result in this situation escalating, that kind of thinking within your team is what tabletops, especially if you can run a couple of them internally yourself, that's the kind of things that it generates and creates importance within your security posture. I always say this to my teams, is the most important thing about tabletops is you learn very quickly that communications is one of the most underrated control in cybersecurity. I don't see it as, oh yeah, communications is about can you figure out where to put in a serial comma or not. That's good if you do know how to do it, but I look at communications as a security control within my organizations, and that's what tabletops help me with.
I can build on that further, Ali. Such a great way to start with. I think it's factual that the latest NIST version addition was around governance, and it fits right back into where you mentioned about the relationship between stakeholders or different business functions across a company is a key factor to making a tabletop exercise valuable or results oriented, right? How you execute during a tabletop exercise is actually quite close to how you may be trying to solve a problem in real time. But I also wanted to add to that, where it comes as a very huge value to an organization is it allows you an opportunity to, sure, you may feel that there are some controls in place, communication or some tactical controls, etc. But do they actually work? It allows you that opportunity to actually test them. And one more before I pass it over. Something that really was helpful when I was doing, the war gaming is what we used to call it, was, actually turn something down. Switch off a control intentionally to make that tabletop exercise a real exercise, just making sure, it does not really cause like big or significant impacts. Inform some people, but let's see how it works in that room. How do we communicate in sort of a close to real world, real time scenario, and see how those controls and who knows who works on what in what business function in terms of, okay, if we need to talk to operations or we need to talk to somebody from infrastructure team, how the two make sense in a particular scenario. So I think, yeah, I'm pausing here.
I would add to that, I think one thing that we sometimes don't recognize is that tabletops also demonstrate that it's not just a technical response, like you said, Ali, is that it is actually an organizational response. And in a lot of cases, when you're pulling that organization, and that can be at your executive level, and that can also be at your board of directors level, you're getting people involved and you're getting people to understand the roles and responsibilities that are going to be on them, but also what other people are going to be doing. They're going to have an understanding of what you as the technical team is going to have to face, so that when they're asking their questions and they're trying to figure out what they need to do, they have the understanding that every role, what they're doing is important. Another thing we've seen through a lot of these tabletops that we've done throughout the years is that it also brings awareness to the importance of prevention and resilience. And so that can also sometimes lead to stronger budgets that will actually help you in the future to build and protect yourself.
So
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more piece to this, is just to kind of build up on what Melina and Pearl was saying around, and I think the big piece is the relationship building across the teams. A lot of people don't realize that is like a successful tabletop is, it shouldn't be the first time in an incident that you're actually going and speaking with someone, or, or first time in so a tabletop really kind of helps you like start, it's a start to building those key relationships, whether it's with the business, whether it's with other members of the team. And then it's that muscle memory, right? Because if you do them periodically, you're really kind of building that muscle memory, so that in the event of a real incident, you're not thinking, you at least, because there's a lot of other things you're probably going to be thinking about, but there's some things that you just then know, okay, I've done this before, and you just execute on that. And finally, it's like coming together at the end of a tabletop and reflecting together. And there's some things that are going to work well, some things that are not going to work well, right? So I think it's kind of like almost reflecting together is like, how do we move together? So it's really, I would say a lot of it over the years we're seeing is tabletops really help you build strong relationships with the members of the teams you're working with.
So just to quickly build on what Hardeep had said, for me, tabletops and the efficiencies of a tabletop is very simple. We do fire drills, as part of WorkSafe. We do earthquake drills here in the West Coast because these are risks that we have to try to get ahead of. And, tabletops, just like these types of drills, helps us build that muscle memory so that we can very quickly make decisions about how to deal with the threat at hand.
Awesome. I want to circle back. What Pearl said is like, does it actually work? And that is the most important part of these tabletop exercises, is to really validate that are your people, process, and technologies actually working as expected, and ideally finding that out in a safe environment rather than from an external threat actor coming in. Building on that, like what is your definition of success when it comes to running a tabletop exercise? And Hardeep mentioned it's knowing, having failures. I think, in my opinion, walking away from a tabletop and being like, yeah, that worked out really well, you did not do a good tabletop exercise because you really didn't stress test for all the potential unknowns. I wanted to hear from the people on the call. What are some of the other things that would be definitions of success?
Two words for me, RTO and RPO, for the control that I was hoping to turn off if we are able to get back in within those.
Yeah, and that's pretty relevant to what type of business you're in, right? Some businesses have a much bigger appetite for, going offline for the day. Others can't withstand, even minutes.
Yeah. I think, Alex, I'll return the favor and follow Parul like she followed me in the first question. I think success is defined in stages when it comes to tabletops. And I think your first level of success is who did you get at the table to participate in it? One of the things that you learn from ODTN is, I agree, RTO, RPOs, all of these things, looking at your BIAs, et cetera, are all critical. But I think one of the things you learn from ODTN is the audience. And when you get some of the people, such as CFOs, CTOs, and then even executive directors who may not be technical, when you have some of them observe and participate and go to those moments where they realize, we didn't know this, or we didn't know something like this could happen, that's when you realize you've hit certain levels of success. So for me, everybody's at a different stage of their tabletop journey. But if you're at the very onset, success comes in stages. And the first for me is, who did you engage, either directly in the exercise or to at least observe? And this is where creativity is key. And that's where I feel ODTN has hit it out of the park, not just because of a quality production, but because they've now brought people into the room in an engaging fashion. And I think that's one stage of success for tabletops that can go underrated, but is extremely important. My 2 rupees worth of thought, Alex.
I love that. And again, it's such a soft target that doesn't sound like it is important, particularly when it comes to cybersecurity. But like, if you can't get the business who doesn't care about IT in the room to understand how important, how critical IT is to that business, you're always going to be that team, that cost center, rather than the business. Anyone else want to chime in on
Yeah.
I actually had one more thought, if I may go in again quickly.
Go
So,
ahead.
Ali, you mentioned about the event coming up on April 3rd itself. I think one of the major components that I am really enjoying about it is how we are considering ripple effects of something that originates from somewhere, but it has ripple effects to different corners around it. So another success factor for me out of a tabletop would be identifying those ripple effects. Yes, that turning off of particular control, we know the expectations of what could go wrong with when we turn off that control. However, what else could go wrong with it would be another success factor. And that's what we are also taking care of in this event, just for everybody else's information who may have joined us today. Sorry, Hardeep, please go ahead.
Oh, no, I just kind of wanted to build up on that. And kind of what Ali was mentioning is, I think it's really one way of, success is to really demonstrate the value of IT and technology, right? So when you do these tabletops, it's, a lot of times, when you work in a technology field, people don't really realize the value of how you're engaging and helping each of the business areas be successful. The other area of success where I see is where the business walks away with action items, because, I've seen a lot of tabletops, and next thing you know is like IT is now walking away with all the action items, and it's not really successful, right? So where I see real success is where the business starts taking ownership for a lot of the key pieces, and that's what actually even helps drive future value for IT, because now they really truly see the value and how we can continue to help them. So we could put in all the controls as you want, right? But the business really needs to see value, and true success for us is really measured by, okay, how were they engaged, and are they actually walking away with things that now they create the demand for the technology teams.
Awesome. And the last one on this topic, I want to move on, but what is a good cadence or frequency for tabletops running inside? And again, we recognize there is value of getting external facilitators in there to really throw sticks in the spokes, but I think there's a balance that there should be external, but there should also be, maybe micro tabletops internally. But what are your thoughts on like what businesses should be doing? Is it a once in a lifetime event? Is it once a year? Is it more frequent?
I can start it off. So usually what we generally recommend is that it's really when it comes to a technical, you want to keep that cadence pretty tight. Either 3 times a year. Most likely, most businesses will do it twice a year just because we all have full schedules. But on the other part of it, the executive, that one's important to do at least once a year, making sure, and it doesn't have to be the same one. It can be different scenarios. It can be different real life situations, but at the same time, you're testing them on a yearly basis because people change. The roles flip over, the responsibilities change, your maturity also grows at the same time. And that's both at that technical and the executive level.
Awesome. So a show of hands, and I'm not going to raise my hand because I've got an AI camera that takes hand gesture commands, and I've not been able to, take control of it the way I want. But who has read the Phoenix Project? No one? All right. Okay, I got one and two.
I'm gonna do a real hand. Long time ago, but yes, definitely ready.
Long time ago for me. And Michael, I don't know if I saw a virtual hand pop up, but it's something that I think you'd really appreciate. I read it back in 2015 and couldn't put it down. And I was reading it on vacation. So imagine reading a book on the beach about IT. But it was awesome. So for those who haven't read it, the book is technically a fictional account of a company's trials and tribulations of their digital transformation journey, with a lot of face palms and laughs. And sometimes it feels like you've actually worked on this fictional team because of all the idiosyncrasies and scenarios they get themselves in. And one of the characters is named Brent, and he's a lead engineer who's been around the company for so long, he's essentially an oracle. And the book describes him as having a monopoly on knowledge of their IT environment and therefore must be present for anything to get done. Now, it is great having brilliant people on the team until they go on vacation. So in the context of tabletop exercises, what are some of the concerns with having a Brent on your team, or what I like to call the alpha nerds on the team?
Yeah. I have something to say in 1 minute to that, Alex. For me, that is a very, very big concern. Phoenix Project is one thing to look at, but I've always now, again, if there's anybody that's a cricket fan over here, you're going to totally appreciate what I'm about to say. But in cricket, I watch a lot of cricket, and I support India and South Africa quite a bit. And both these teams have 1 or 2 players who, if they're not there, technically, that team, that one player in a team of 11, if that person's not there, while the team can function, there's something off. For me, what I have done in my security teams, and I've seen the Indian cricket team do this well, and I picked it up from them, is they've taken players or certain individuals within their team and taken others to be mentored by them. And I feel this is extremely important. The makeup of your security team and your CSIRT, if it exists of all superstars and everyone that's super technical, super specialized in their field, you have a problem. My CSIRT, the way I organize it is, yes, I have executives within it, but then I also have a couple of junior staffers and a couple of up and coming staffers who are mentored by their seniors, so that some of those best practices can trickle down over, and you can have even a shadow of that level of expertise in an event where that person is away. For me, what this has pointed out to is you have to structure your CSIRT in a way where there's knowledge transfer not happening as somebody's leaving and now HR kicks in. That knowledge transfer has to happen from a mentorship perspective, and you have to take the gamble and put somebody in there who maybe has not done this level of security operations before, but has to learn. I recently made a hire where I brought somebody in who has zero IT background, but their ability to learn and their willingness, you know what they say, you hire for skill, you fire for fit. I brought this person in for fit, and we're grooming the skills in that person. For me, it comes down to how you make up your team and how you organize your CSIRT, and there is a culture change that is needed over there.
So in a tabletop exercise, you have a Brent or an alpha nerd answering all the questions. What do you do?
Send them for coffee and see what happens. No, I'm serious. I mean, this is the point of the tabletop, right? You try to find the holes in Dr. Reason's Swiss cheese model, and Brent becomes a hole if he's not available. So yeah, send him to Starbucks and say, hey, just expensive, grab everybody a coffee. It's fine. He comes back an hour later, and if the room is in confusion, we have a big problem, folks.
Yeah, that's a perfect way of doing it. And like I said, previously, is that if you have somebody like that is so good at the technical components of things, right? What ends up happening is they're basically going to take the conversation into a pigeonhole, and that does not help test the other areas of the business that you're trying to understand where the weaknesses and gaps are. So things like, the process, for example, the business processes. So really take them out, as Michael said, send them on a coffee run.
Another strategy I would also suggest is that there is a way to kind of empower them to be a note taker, empower them to find those gaps in a quieter way, so that to Ali's point, is you're mentoring, you're giving them that, you're not taking it away, because in some cases that can also result in a little bit of a morale hit. It's a way to encourage the culture of learning and succession. And I think very often we get so blinded by what we're dealing with right now and what's in front of us and we build a lot of our identity in that case, and that might be the situation. So helping them reframe their thought, helping them reframe their identity and how they're going to approach it may work to also build your culture in that sense of teaching and mentoring.
I do like that soft approach, but in my mind, the learning opportunity for the business as a whole is to really show abrupt change and challenge. And I think I actually did a tabletop with Pearl a few years back where one of the individuals just knew everything and was answering all the questions perfectly. So I asked him, "Have you ever been on a Disney cruise?" And he's like, "No, I haven't." I'm like, "Well, you're on one right now." And that sidelines him to show that huge gap that gets created. And that's where it's, in my mind, it's so important to show that you have these rock star, people on your team, and the business is built these single points of failure because it works. Why change anything? And that's a big aha moment for a lot of companies when they realize that they didn't write anything down. Tribal knowledge is really not a sustainable practice, especially when it's within one person. So I always like to send people on cruises, virtually, because these people should have vacation generally, and they get a little frustrated, but at the end of the day, in the report, the post, you start discussing that, like, listen, like, as soon as that person went on vacation, all hell broke loose, and I think that's leads to another question, is like, how do you communicate a risk like this to the business?
So I actually had a thought, Alex, since you shared that, together lived example, that was actually 7.5 minutes in, and Alex was like, "Nope, you go on vacation." That was fantastically done. But continuing to build and trekking my way into the other question here. So Carnegie Mellon's very nicely introduced capability maturity model actually is all around how well you have your services/practices scalable and repeatable. Those are the things that actually help an organization define if they are from that scale of 1 to poorly, practices, or 5, very well documented and repeated and practiced over time practices. So the key to getting to the maturity level from a CMMI perspective is not only to have the world's excellent control in place, but how you could avoid those single point of failures is another critical element to mature your services and your internal doings of things, right?
Well said. Anyone else?
I think from a BCP perspective, right? So IT needs to work a little bit closer with some of those business processes, like business continuity, because those folks in the business continuity department they're thinking about resiliency. What if so and so is on vacation and we need them? And in this particular case, I think there are synergies that both departments can work well together and think about these things ahead of time.
I think sometimes we forget that to I'm going to use the dreaded air quotes, the business. What we do as security professionals is black magic voodoo, and we don't understand. I just heard Jerry Bell and Andrew Callett of the Defense and Security podcast talking about this just yesterday, where we need to go to them and say, look, you guys, you need us. Yes, we need you. This is where we are the business too. But hey, if this system is unavailable, or this person is unavailable, or this application doesn't work properly, what happens now? And they need to understand, not the technical, they don't care about that. That's why we have jobs, but they need to understand, and we need to help them understand what it is that the risk is. And they need to understand that we can't own the risk because we're not the business practice, right? We're the security function.
And I'll add to that. The IT as a cost center, is a derogatory term to suggest that if we could pay less, we would. And while that probably worked 10 years ago, there isn't a business that isn't almost entirely reliant on all the things working all the time. And when those things stop working, that's going to be an issue. So whether it's a single point of failure with the smartest person in the room, or how IT has been laid out and how it's supporting users and customers, we need to, and Michael, you're totally right. Like, we're not really the risk owner, the entire risk owner of the business here. We are advisors, we're experts in our craft, and we help meet those objectives of the business. But we do need to do a better job of communicating that to the business of what a bad day looks like, which is why bringing those executives to these tabletop exercises so that they can see when Brent goes on vacation, or a zero-day vulnerability pops up on your router or something like that, that it becomes a bad day quite quickly. And all of a sudden, IT is not a cost center. It's, we will pay anything to get IT back up online.
Alex, if I can just jump in really quickly, I think everything that was just said is absolutely spot on. And I want to go back to that metaphor of sending people on a cruise. Although I'm pretty sure with that mighty hair of yours, you can model for enough shampoos and send me on a physical cruise as well. But that's a separate story. We have Roshan on the call here, right? And I think we really that metaphor about going on a cruise. One of the things that Roshan does really well is she creates these prompts, those media prompts of this is what's going on right now. And then she stages interviews, etc. I think that is an extremely important element of tabletops as well. So Roshan, you thought you could get away by just smiling away, but you're not. You're a critical element to ODTN. So do you want to share a little bit about your philosophy on creating those prompts?
Yeah, of course. So brief introduction. My name's Roshan, and I'm a technical coordinator at CyberX. So my job includes arranging and organizing technicalities for our different events, such as Operation Defend the North. And I think that the prompts are actually a key component of it all, because the atmosphere has to feel real life, right? Because the reactions changed based on the atmosphere. If it doesn't feel like it's a real life intense scenario, the reactions won't be right. The reactions won't be as intense as real life as they would be. So I think, it's important to get people out of their office desk and involved in something that feels just as intense as it would be in real life. So yeah, that's a little bit about that.
And true story, when Roshan tells you no phones at the desk during a tabletop, if she catches a phone, that's you without a phone for a significant amount of time. She'll take it away. So thanks, Roshan. Sorry, Alex, I interjected, but I'll give it back to you, Captain.
Hey, no worries. A friend recently quoted a favorite book of mine, Principles by Ray Dalio, under the context of business resiliency and incident response. And in the book, the author discusses that when we strive for great things or take on challenges, we're likely to feel pain and setbacks before the success. And he goes on to suggest that success is not about avoiding discomfort, but embracing it, or what he refers to as struggling well. So in the context of incident response, what do you think struggling well means to you?
I'm gonna wait. I talk too much. I think part of fasting is I'm supposed not to talk as much, but I talk more when I'm fasting. This is not a good thing. But anyways, if nobody else is chiming in, I will.
I'm trying
Okay.
not to save too much.
Okay, very quickly, I think struggling well for me has been one of those moments where you admit that you don't know something. And it's very difficult when you're in, we do at least 2 tabletop exercises a quarter, just because the nature of the institution that I lead, we need that. There have been occasions when I don't know, right? I may not know how a configuration is implemented. I may not know what the exact vendor relationship is. You have to be strong enough to admit and say you don't know and have a plan of action to improve. I think mentally for me, tabletops have been less about telling myself, oh, well done, look at how prepared I am, but more about you got to be prepared to realize that there are things that you don't know. And if you can come out with knowing what you do not know and have an action plan to develop and learn more on that, I think that's a good way to struggle well. A lot of it also comes down to the support system that you have from the C-suite. If you are expected to know everything and that's just the ruling order, then you need to have a hard think about where you are and how long do you want to continue in that position. That's a hard fact, but it's some of those decisions that we have to make.
I
Yeah,
can
what
chime.
Newman, did you want to go ahead, please?
Okay. So in my years of doing incident response and doing investigations, there are times where, some of the techniques that you're seeing is so new that nobody even knows how to even like digest it or figure out how it works. And oftentimes, you need to really show some progress in the investigation. You need to show that you are learning and getting to sort of the root of the problem. And it really does take a village when it comes to dealing with these types of things. I can tell you that I've had one case where I worked on where I had to call other peers in my industry and ask them, have you ever seen this before? This particular bad person is doing something. I've never seen this technique ever, and I don't even know if it actually even works, or they're just trying it. And then my peers will come back to me and say, you know what? I saw this 3 months ago. Similar threat actor. Maybe it's the same. We don't really know just yet because attribution is hard. But they did the same thing, and they were just testing the client's defenses. It never resulted in anything. The artifacts show up in the logs, but it is if you follow kind of where this could go from a technology perspective, there's an opportunity that could cause the technology, the device, to fail. And from that, we're able to, as researchers, put together some research, some papers, things like that, and share that with the community. So the struggle really is real, but I want to leave you with a quote from Halo, Master Chief in particular, because it's on Netflix. Um, Together we prevail is the quote. And I feel like, struggling in incident response, we have to come together as a whole. All the investigators, all the researchers, we have to work together. And that's how we're going to be the bad guys.
You definitely covered one of the points I was going to say, Newman. Thank you very much. That was such a great reflection. I think one quick point there is coming together as one team is definitely, the heart of the success. Also, what helps is incident response team generally is a team sometimes that could get siloed. And they tend to think that, oh, we only need to act when we are needed to act. I always want to contend that feeling or that statement, because incident team is actually, for me, is that on the horizon or the high level that's probably is connected to the rest of the cyber and including business team. Why? Because if incident team, for example, if the business does not have the right definitions around what's critical to business, an incident team is sort of missing on that boat, and there are 2 things that are going on one fine day, which one do they prioritize first? So keeping themselves in that silo might not help them to the best of their ability to actually add to the success of the whole organization, not just cyber team.
So I'll just jump in really quickly. And to everybody's point, they've all had great thoughts in this. But I think part of it too is struggling well is also making sure your team's supported, both at the technical level. So there's a lot going on and there's a lot of stress and there's a lot of people are rearranging schedules, people are working through weekends, people are working and sleeping on the floor in some cases. Making sure that they're supported, making sure that that preparation that you've done, not just in tabletops, but in plans and policies, and everybody knows their role is going to be part of that. So I think struggling well is that identification that you've done all the work before that will actually create that support mechanism in place now, and that people can feel that if they need to take a break, they can. They know who to go to if they need something. They know that they're supported. They know that, I mean, just the simple thing of having, somebody ordering a slice of pizza is important too. So that you understand that there are people behind these moments because they're extremely stressful and they have significant psychological impact later on in time too. The business is not, especially in a critical, the business is not going to be just feeling it for the 24 or 48 hours that they're experiencing the incident. It'll be 6 months to a year before they're back to normal. And that is a financial impact, that is a psychological impact. So struggling well to me is also making sure that you have those processes in place to make sure everybody gets out of it intact and empowered.
I'm voting Melina Prime Minister. I say that all the time, but yeah, spot on. Thank you for that.
I'll jump in there that's spot on because on the support side, because at the end of the day, there are, the great incident responders are a unique breed. They run to fires, not run away from it. They are comfortable with the unknown. They're comfortable with conflicting information, and that's a skill set that not everyone has. A lot of people do actually get quite impacted with a saturation of information, conflicting information, different priorities. How many times have we been on incidents where the business is saying bring things back online, and we're still trying to do the eradication stage of actually making sure that threat is fully out, and to no surprise, they get reinfected and it delays the recovery day, at least a day, if not longer. But for all those people that are rolling up their sleeves and burning the candle at both ends, trying to bring a business back online, the support is important. And I recall, I took the SANS 504 years ago, and part of that was building a go bag for your team. And certainly, granola bars and energy drinks and whatnot, but also, deodorant are things that we probably don't bring to work. And if we're going to be sticking around to try to solve this problem, there are these things that, will just make it more comfortable in a very uncomfortable situation, and ideally give the incident responders that breathing room to focus on what they're doing and not worrying about getting food or the other supporting mechanisms that may distract them. So really appreciate that support piece.
And I think one thing, I'm just going to add one thing that I think that is sometimes missed is that cybersecurity incidents are veiled in fog, versus in many other incidents that happen is that there is a tangible, there's something that you can see, you can solve, you know what it is, versus that's not the nature of a cybersecurity incident. And that is the difference in the business continuity is that threat actors thrive off of the obscurity that they are hiding behind. And that makes it even more tenuous when it comes to how an organization responds.
Totally. And, one thing that I wanted to circle back with what Newman mentioned in terms of, trying to determine, throughout the life cycle of incident response, you've got the detect and analysis phase. Now, in my experience, I've definitely run into organizations that really want to solve the murder mystery. And in my mind, the detect and analysis phase is very much trying to understand what's impacted trying to understand what's going on. But and thank you, Melina. I love the term fog of war, and the fog of incident response is just as thick. It isn't necessarily that important to figure out who done it. Understanding what is actually happening is good, because that may trigger different playbooks, different responses. But is there an agreement here that generally it's not that important to start trying to develop attribution of who the bad guys or girls are? There's a different priority, and what would that priority be?
Well, I'll jump in. I'll say, for me, as the SOC guy, for me, I want to know how they got it in the first place, so that doesn't happen again. So they can't waltz right back in as soon as you say, "Hey, okay, we're out, everything's good, turn it back on." As you said, Alex, we want to make sure they can't get back in, that door is now closed, barred, shut, locked, the gate's down, and we can start looking at recovery, as opposed to just going straight back into another response as soon as we think where everything is okay.
Exactly, and that's where I found that everyone wants to understand who wronged them, for sure, but is that actually that important? Particularly since we have almost no legal recourse to go after the majority of cyber criminals that are targeting business. Is it more important to find out who it was them with the candlestick in the library, or is it getting that business back online, getting people to be productive, and making sure that the business doesn't have those situations again? And that's an educational piece I find I've had to do as soon as I get on site with clients. Have you experienced similar situations?
Yeah, there's always a clash of priorities. So from an incident responder's, like an investigator's perspective, like my priority is really to understand first and foremost what happened, and then secondly, if there's patient zero, I need to be able to get to patient zero and find out whether there's any evidence left for me to facilitate my investigation. So those will be my investigator's priorities, but understanding that oftentimes that is going to clash with the business priorities of, say, keeping the lights on. So it's a bit of a fight, and I think that there has to be a consensus when we come into these types of scenarios. And in some cases, some things have to go, some things have to stay, and we'll have to negotiate that one.
Now, Alex, if I can jump in for a minute there, I think attribution for me still is important, especially in situations, always contextual, but especially in situations where an organization has experienced their first ever major takedown or their first ever major incident. Because education around threat intelligence and understanding what can potentially be hitting you, who, where, what, where, when, why, is an extremely important conversation that shouldn't just be happening at the end of an incident, but should be a continuous dialogue. This is why one of the tasks that I have put within some of my security teams is threat intelligence as a form of consistent communication. We have lunch and learns, we have webinars, we have newsletters, but actually being able to discuss threat intelligence in a way that's engaging is critical, and that helps, and that always reminds you of why discussing attribution is important. I think, for example, last week my team put out a really nice message about why you should be watching 0 Day, for example, and why that's important. I think those conversations and then understanding from there, that makes attribution a bit important, so people can understand the wider motivations around these attacks.
So attribution is important in the sense that if you want to facilitate justice, absolutely. Being able to identify who pulled the trigger is phenomenal in terms of a more permanent long-term solution to stopping these attacks from happening in the first place. But I think business priorities somewhat overtake that in most cases, and in some cases, don't forget the fact that the bad guys are equally as good at hiding their actions, and make it extremely difficult for us as investigators to actually identify who they are. Oftentimes, we really need for them to make a mistake in order for us to identify who they are.
Sometimes identification of who they are also allows us to understand their motives of what they're doing and why they're doing and what to expect when we're moving forward too. So if we know that a specific group goes after intellectual property, or if they are financially motivated, or if they're looking to, conduct some fraud within the systems, then at least we know where we're targeting as well. So attribution, it's true that there is that balance between what the business needs to move forward, but at the same time, understanding the who, what, when, why, like Ali had said, is also important so that we're able to fully make sure that the organization has that eradication that's happened, but also that they're building their resilience moving forward so that they're not at risk of further infection or further threat.
And I think that is the epitome of the conflicting priorities. And, in the example I was giving, I get on site and they're adamant they want to know who. And, maybe they had some business reasons for it, but at the end of the day, there was an impact to the organization's ability to operate. And you would need to balance bringing the business back online in a secure state versus holding the business at a degraded state while you're trying to determine. And I always joke that I went to school for the cybers, and there was a lot about forensics. And in my 20 years working even in the federal space, while there were requirements for that, I maybe can count 3 or 4 times where we needed forensic litigation quality logging, which takes time to get and whatnot. And arguably when an organization is down is a distraction from what the organization probably needs to realize and realizes after the fact. Bringing the business back online is a higher priority. Again, it will be unique to each business, but in the experiences I've had to sort of talk them off the ledge, saying, if we want to go down that road of sifting through a terabyte of logs before we start recovery, you're delaying by X amount of hours or whatnot, and trying to educate the true risk owner on the pros and cons and the likely outcomes of doing a side quest of forensics.
And how many times have I done a forensics investigation and then go back to the customer and say, couldn't find anything?
Yeah, which is, again, if the threat actors are doing things well, or more likely, the organization has a visibility gap, it may remain a mystery, which it does for probably the majority of incidents. Anyways, boy, does time fly when we're having great conversations. Am I right? So, just to wrap up, we are going to put up a code up here or down here for people to register. We're offering free streaming tickets today. Plus, we're giving away 50% off tickets for in-person. And again, this event, Operation Defend the North, is happening April 3rd in downtown Vancouver at the SFU WASC Center. And for more information and to purchase tickets virtually, please visit cyberx.org. That's cyberx.org. And lastly, I would like to thank the Operation Defend the North Advisory Board for participating in this lively conversation, and for all those on the interwebs tuning in. And with that, I will see you in the future.